Logan-Cache Airport Authority Board. We appreciate your interest in the airport and your support by being here. We'll begin by asking for approval of the minutes from the November meeting. I have one change that had a misspelling on a name. So, is there a motion to accept?
I wasn't here, so I'm not going to motion to accept. So I will let somebody that was here to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to, I'll make a motion to approve the.
And I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. That's one of the toughest motions we've had in years. So.
All downhill now.
What do we need to vote?
The county and the city are in the process of reaffirming the appointments of their representatives to the board, and we'll know who those are in future meetings.
We need to vote on the minutes.
It is a tough day. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll have an election for the board chair for the coming year. Are there any nominations?
I nominate John Kerr if he's willing to do it again.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll do it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And vice chair. And Brett has been serving as vice chair.
And I'll nominate Brett to serve as vice chair if he's willing.
And I'll second that.
Any other nominations or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I will say that Brett has been very helpful in the past year with the master plan and lately in doing some fine tuning and getting our some emergency gas handling equipment installed and operational. Judd, bring us up to date on the grant process and the capital improvements schedule.
Absolutely. Judd Hill with Armstrong Consultants. And, oh, wrong one. So do very much appreciate, just as a follow-up, the help with the master plan. It is going along. We were very excited in December. In February, we had submitted to the FAA the forecast for operations at the airport. They had old numbers that had been reported by 2 managers ago that were low, specifically 45,000 versus the reality of 130,000. And then the forecast growing to almost 200,000 operations a year. They were showing it growing to about 50,000 operations a year. So 400% plus. Anything over 10% over their internal forecast, it has to go all the way up to headquarters. So the forecast approval that normally takes 6 weeks took 10 months. But it got approved on December 13th. We had to do a couple of fine tweaks to the next working paper, which got sent out to the TAC for, I think it was last week. I can't remember exactly when I sent that out, but I think it was before New Year's. But so something to be reviewed and moving forward on the master plan. So it was great. It was multiple iterations. The local FAA was supportive and understood the reality of the airport, just it didn't match the big FAA's numbers. And so therefore, it was a lot of back and forth to prove that, hey, this is how busy the airport actually is. Because it was one thing when it was a busy airport within the state, and there's a very different one when it's, hey, this is top 3 busiest airports in the state. Significant change, but not actually a change. It was just a change in the records and the forecast. So it now the FAA recognizes and has the numbers to support how busy the airport actually is. So with that, I wanted to do that just as a little bit of intro into the CIP process, because the CIP is the capital improvement plan. It gets looked at and reviewed and updated annually. Officially, it can be discussed at absolutely any time, but once a year it goes through the FAA process. And it is about describing what planning is going to be happening, what infrastructure projects, what type of equipment, all of that has to go through the CIP. The big part dealing with the master plan, and that process going on right now. If something is not within the master plan on the airport layout plan, it can't be funded. So that's why the planning is very critical in order to develop the future long-term projects. And I'm just going to kind of flash through. These are just kind of the minutes of the meeting that were held. It was Jason Ryrie, John Kerr, the FAA, and UDOT with us kind of as a moderator for it, discussing the CIP. And we'll kind of go to, we make this large. Is there a way to zoom other than, okay.
Down there.
We'll just start with, you can see the different colors differentiate the different years. There are 2 years listed just because of the funding comes from the FAA, which runs on the October 1st fiscal year, and then there's also funding coming from UDOT, which runs on the July 1st fiscal year. So that's why you can see different types of, or different dates on the same projects. This current year, it will be next state fiscal year will be an upcoming project to address taxiway Charlie. And that is the parallel taxiway to the crosswind runway. Right now, that runway is ineligible for any federal funding because the wind analysis says the main runway running north-south meets all the needs of the airport, with the exception of how busy it is. The forecast that they just accepted says this airport is reaching the capacity for safe operations for a single runway airport. And the recommendation of the FAA, when airports get to that point, is to look at a secondary runway. Now, under the most ideal situation, given the winds within the valley, that new runway would be directly parallel to the big runway, but that's a $50 million project. That would require just astronomical amounts of work and removal of buildings. It's pretty much unattainable. However, you actually have another runway right now with the crosswind runway. So with that forecast being accepted, the next stages of the master plan are saying bring that runway back into federal funding, so that instead of having to only rely on local funding and state funding to maintain that runway in its system, in the future it will be hopefully eligible for federal funding. And that was a big reason why a 10-month review on forecast, because they knew that's the reality of them saying, yes, the airport actually is this busy and will continue to grow. That's the reality of that situation. But in the short term, taxiway Charlie is the far end of it has basically completely failed. Some parts it has the better appearance of a gravel road than of a taxiway. And so this project is a state-funded project to look at fixing that up for the small general aviation aircraft that will be using it. So that is technically just the 2025 UDOT year. The federal funding this year is being saved up, and then this next federal fiscal year, October 1st, it's looking at acquiring snow removal equipment. I know that there's been a lot of work that Jason done prior to his departure, and then a lot of work with the county to establish help with snow plowing operations for the upcoming years, but this is about a strong need that was discussed in the past regarding updating snow removal equipment. So the next time federal dollars are getting spent here, it's going towards that SRE equipment, and that would be in the federal year starting in October, starting in 10 months from now. Also looking at the development of Taxi Lane India, which is a taxi lane to service, open up unused space within the airport. The next years down are looking at saving funding so that it can be used to create a building, a snow removal equipment building. It's great if you have equipment, but the winters are cold and the summers are hot and sunny. It's not the best for equipment sitting outside for long periods of time, which is what has happened for the duration of the airport. So this is looking at protecting the investments that you're making in the equipment in previous years. On the outer years, 29, 30, it's looking at the main parallel taxiway for reconstruction. It is already exceeded it's right about its expected life. It's doing very well, but it is deteriorating. I mean, no road can happen without, or no road or no runway can exist without proper maintenance in the long term. So that's what's looking out in 29 and 30. And then looking farther out, the rehab of runways. And yes, the runway was adjusted, or it was rehabbed with the mill and overlay 4 years ago. So this is looking out to another 10 years out. They should be rehabbed about every 10 to 12 years. This is putting it out at about 14 years because it's doing well. But the big reason why this is on here is that I'm going to slide over a little bit. The way that kind of work can happen is going after federal discretionary funding, which the FAA is budgeting in the 5 to 15 year time frame. So if there's going to be those large projects, you want to get them on a list 10 years plus out so that they can start to be planned for, both in terms of the need for local funding and match funding, as well as for the FAA and the state to start budgeting, because they only have limited funding, and 46 different airports in the state can't all come to say we need a runway in 3 years. So instead, they need to be looking at that 10-year out so they can start to shuffle. And hey, if you have 6 airports needing a runway in 1 year, it would be better for them to shuffle it to 2 runways over a 3-year time period. So that's just why that kind of project is included on this list, so that it can get on their radar as they need to start planning in their long-term budgeting for the long-term maintenance of the airport. Within this, so any questions on that list?
I have a question. Take for instance, I see taxi lane. What was it? Taxi lane India.
India, yes.
So, a couple of questions. What about some of the other taxi lanes that I driving through? There are some that have standing water. If it rains or whatever, there's a lot of fairly spots that there's some rough spots of those. Is there, inside of the master plan, is there some areas that we realize that the federal doesn't fund, but we can itemize those out? Or in the master plan, is it mostly centered on what the federal funding will take care of? I guess that's the real question I have is are we really focused in the master plan on just what the federal funds would be available for?
I would say mostly focused, not completely. Because it is federally required for federal funds, so it's tailored to that audience. But it also recognizes the additional audiences, specifically the state, who is the next largest funder, and then obviously local, because that every project requires local funding. The others. So with regards to the federal funding and taxi lanes around the hangars, that in their infinite wisdom of the FAA, they stopped funding taxi lanes several years ago. The India is one using the bill funding, which was the infrastructure law passed a couple years ago, and it has a little more wiggle room, so that kind of project can happen. The maintenance for the construct, correct. For maintenance is more reliant upon local and to a lesser extent the state, because the state also with they have a specific budget as well, and that budget starts on runways and moves out. So with all the airports within the state, they will always look at, is the runway good? Is the taxiway, is the apron? And then the catch with, because runways, taxiways, aprons are used by the airport, they're used by the full community, they're used by transient, business, everything associated with aviation, general aviation. Taxi lanes traditionally are more focused on private use only. So I'll pick on taxi lane Mike because it doesn't exist here. But taxi lane Mike that has multiple hangars on it, if it's got 10 hangars on it, those are only 10 private entities that are utilizing that space. So in terms of funding, is it better to adjust the apron that those 10 will be using as well as every other user of the airport? So that's the catch with taxi lane maintenance. And
I guess my question is just where that fits into our plan. If it's a master plan, if that fits in this or not, or if we need to make sure we budget for that separately.
it will definitely be recognized and discussed within the master plan. The budgeting though is limited it's not allowed at the federal level and it's limited at the state level. But the states definitely do help some with taxi lane or building. With the FAA, if you have an apron, or excuse me, a hangar directly on the apron, you actually cannot spend a federal dollar within 50 feet of that building. States help make that up. So the state definitely does recognize, hey, this is pavement, we need to help out with it. But it is often heavily local as well. And one that, as you rightly pointed out, needs to be addressed and included.
Related to that maintenance, perhaps address where we are with getting help with marking replacements.
Okay.
Markings?
Yep.
Where
Oh,
are we on that process?
that is working with the state, so the state's meeting with FAA to work out their larger budget, and then we'll address what funds are available. So the state and the FAA sat down with the airport, as they did with all the other airports in the state, and got lists like this for every different airport, and now they're shuffling and figuring out exactly what will go into their finalized budget as they go into budget seasons. One of those is dealing with short-term and long-term paint maintenance. The center lines, when you scrape heavy with heavy snow falls leads to extra snow plowing. Extra snow plowing leads to lots of metal scraping up paint, causing a deterioration of the paint, up to and including sometimes even ripping it off of the asphalt, which then needs to be remarked. There is a plan for next year for pavement preservation, which includes remarking as well. So any pavement preservation projects would include the repainting as well. And then the state is also looking to see if they can help with a large scale remarking of the whole airport as well, but they haven't finalized any yes or no answer. Okay, so.
Hey Judd, what does the Charlie runway, what does that do for the university? Does that change, would that change the way you operate to have that second runway? Yeah, with the... Yes, please, yeah. No offense, but I was trying to take off the other day, and we sat there for like 15 minutes. Just there is a lot of traffic on the one, but I don't know if that cross one would take pressure off. You could just help me understand that.
Yeah, so I'm Brandon Parrish with a chief flight instructor with Utah State. Yeah, with the second runway, it would alleviate some of the departures, but as the flight department with university, we've determined the landings itself would not be detrimental, but a little more hazardous because you got people departing on 3-5 and then people would be landing on 1-0, which could create a hazard if there's go-around processes and things like that. But the departure phase, it would alleviate some of that wait time that you experienced. And we experienced that as well within our own fleet. And so we try to alleviate that, so.
Or if you had parallel runways, Judd, to what you're talking about, then that would...
Then you can have both.
Well,
Again, when you have multiple aircraft, whether it's 1, 2, 3 runways, you're going to have some inherent hazard by lots of aircraft in one space. One reality of the amount of operations that you actually have going on right now is the potential of maybe needing a tower. I mean, there are multiple airports across the nation that have a third as much traffic as you, half as much traffic as you, that have air traffic control towers. So, I mean, that's not something that will be happening today, tomorrow. I mean, if it were fast-tracked, it might happen this decade. But it's a reality, and something like if you had a Class D airspace, air traffic control tower on the field, then that would significantly improve and significantly reduce the safety issues, not to mention the benefits of learning to fly when you have to talk to towers. And personally, for me, I learned to fly on an uncontrolled airport, and now when I'm flying at a controlled airport. It's like, wow, I never had to talk to anyone before. I just went and took off, and now I have to talk to someone. And learning that as a student is invaluable, especially given the need for pilot development. So, but I think it's a reality that there's justification to consider a tower in the future, and that would definitely help.
that's helpful, thanks.
And on this picture, you can kind of, the crosswind 1028 is the smaller one, obviously, and the red section is that taxiway Charlie, that portion has failed. The green section on the bottom portion of it was addressed with a previous project about a half dozen years ago. So it's still good.
Do we know, you had traffic counts and volume. Do we know how much of that is split by runway?
We are getting...
And 17 versus 28 and 10, 10?
The numbers that went into the FAA forecast, no. However, starting this past year, the state is funding a program called VerTower, and it is using ADS-B data, which the vast majority of the aircraft flying in and out of your have, I'd say 95%, 99%, have that equipment.
It's required to have, right?
It's not required in uncontrolled airspace, but pretty much, I think every single USU plane has it. I'm assuming there's got to be at least one ultralight or some gliders on the airfield that don't have it. But it's getting to, I would guess, sometime in the next decade, it will be required for every aircraft in the sky. That would be my guess, just because it is very useful to have. The VERTOWER system does differentiate by runway, so there's not a lot of data on it yet, but that data is now being collected
We'll start, because that runway's closed.
throughout the winter because of, and from discussions with both Jason Ribery and Lee Ivey, they did not address that, often heavily related to not being able to plow taxiway Charlie because of its condition. That taxiway will be addressed this year. So yeah, we will have better, we've got several months of that data now, or the airport has several months of that data now, but not in the long run.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We've we have received a request from the Utah National Guard to conduct a 3-day operation on the abandoned runway. It would be between April 18th through the morning of April 21st, where they would have 3 Black Hawks, and they would be operating in connection with the fire department and other emergency services. Still working on the details on that, but we probably, as a board, need to approve their coming. The one hang-up seems to be the purchase of fuel locally, which is a policy throughout the state that any entity coming to the airport and operating out of the airport for an extended period of time needs to buy their fuel locally. That's applied to the fire teams and agricultural applicators, and it's consistent that we require it of the National Guard as well. We try to recoup as much revenue as we can from the people who utilize the airport, and therefore that has been passed back to them. Any further questions or comments about?
Why is the fuel issue a hang-up? Doesn't the National Guard want to?
They want to bring their own truck and bring their own gas rather than buy it locally. And that's typical of these kinds of operations, whether civilian or military. But I checked with other airport managers throughout the state, and every one of them applies that standard to visiting operations.
Can we have a stipulation that some of the board can ride along, make sure that it's?
I'll pass that on. I suspect that there will be opportunities for board members to volunteer as being one of the lost that the search and rescue is trying to recover, and by that way you'll get a ride back. Okay. But you'll have to provide your own transportation.
Probably, okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the National Guard request with the stipulation that fuel be purchased locally.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve the National Guard operation with the stipulation that they purchase the fuel locally. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have a hangar request for one of the orphan spaces that we have. This is a space that's been rejected by everyone else on the waiting list. But this individual is comfortable building the size hangar that it will accept. And this would be on F10. Is there a motion to accept his application?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve Brian Hare's application to build a hangar on F-10. All in favor, say aye. Just as a report, an outstanding item on our 139 inspection last spring was a required automatic fuel shutoff system to be installed on our tanks. That's been completed, and with Brett's help, it's been brought online and is, to my understanding, is now working properly. Scott has acquired a new truck, which is already accepting that limitation that he's upgraded. One other truck, and you have two more to upgrade, is that correct? You're not, you're all done? Okay. So that fuel shut-off system is in place, and I received notification from the inspector that shortcoming had been removed from our report. The EV has been delivered, the electric pickup, and the charger is here, and we'll be working with Cache Valley Electric in getting that installed. This is a charger that has capability of charging two vehicles simultaneously. It will have a modem and card reader, and can be a revenue source. Anticipate it will be located where two trucks or two airplanes can charge simultaneously. That will play into the development with EPS and university in their test project with Diamond Aircraft for electric-powered training aircraft. But anticipate that will go somewhere in the open area between India, existing India, and the office ARF building that we have right now. There's open space there. One thing for us to look forward to, we're having Cache Valley Electric give us an estimate. Our currently sodium vapor lamps that light the ramp are no longer functioning, and we'll be looking at coming with a proposal to upgrade those to LED lights. It will probably need to get on the state funding cycle to qualify. Do not anticipate that it would qualify for FAA funding because it is a replacement of existing rather than a new installation. Are there any other items to come before the board at this time?
I just have a question. Where do we sit on an airport manager?
We're interviewing. Why don't you just repeat your report that you gave me this morning?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you. Some interviews were conducted already, and there was one candidate who was identified as very well qualified, and a job offer was made to him. And after he looked at our housing situation here in the valley, he decided to withdraw his application. So we conducted another interview yesterday, and then we received an additional application yesterday from somebody else we would like to interview. We're going to try to interview him today, and we're hoping from one of those interviews that we'll be able to make another offer soon.
Currently, the duties of the manager are largely being handled by a number of different people.
I was gonna ask that question, who's keeping things running then, in the absence of a manager?
Well, I'm not sure that they're all running, but I'm out there every day. And we have some part-time help that are doing the security inspections. I've done about 10 of them since Jason left, because both of the part-time help were going to be out of town during that period of time. And I've done the nighttime inspections. We currently have that calendar put together for another 10 days, and we'll be getting with those two part-time people and another part-time that is just coming off medical leave. And we'll be able to, between the four of us, continue to meet our requirement in terms of security inspections. We're anticipating a significant snow event starting tonight and into tomorrow through the weekend, and have been very impressed with the people I've dealt with at the county. On their own, they've been out and started all of the equipment this week and made sure all the batteries were charged and hydraulic systems were working. And we reviewed the snow removal plan, and we're in agreement on how that process will work. I'm on the approved list for entering NOTAMs, which is the notice to airmen about conditions at the airport. And Kim Hall is also on that list, and so we'll be able to keep incoming and outgoing flights aware of the current status on the airport. In terms of financing, the paperwork has been submitted for Brittany Kingston and myself to initiate the reimbursement from the grants. And I got word Tuesday that paperwork has been forwarded to national headquarters for approval of that. In the past, that's always been handled just by the manager, but with Jason leaving, it became an obvious shortcoming. And so to have more than just one individual to enter those funding requests seemed appropriate. Jason left things in excellent condition. His efforts with the equipment and arranging a mechanic that was on call and willing to come if necessary on site or to address equipment needs in a timely manner put us, I believe, in better condition than we've been in years going into the snow season. So.
Well, John, is all I can say is thank you so very much. You've been such a kingpin in this whole.
You'll have the night inspection next week. I'll let you know time and place.
On that, do let us know if we can be helpful.
Well, there may be things that you can help us with. Inspections, unfortunately, isn't one of them because it requires going through a little bit of a training course to qualify. It's more than just turning on a flashing light and driving on the runway. Other questions? Again, we appreciate your interest and support of the airport, and we're already putting together the agenda for the February meeting. So put that on your calendars as a little teaser. At our last UAOA meeting, there was a presentation by a company in connection with Vertower who is now using that information to send out bills for landing fees rather than collecting them locally. Several of the airports have already implemented it and are finding it to be very effective. And it'll encourage a discussion among us of who would be exempt. Locally based aircraft, for example. And aircraft that are not registered. And transitioning students. There will be much to talk about at that meeting, so plan accordingly. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if we could go back to the appointment section, I
Yes.
think there was one more item of business we needed to address. Your position on this board is an at-large position that's appointed by this board, and I believe the term of that position has expired, and we as a board need to reappoint you to that at-large position.
Okay. I was thinking it was next year, but okay.
So I would make the motion that for our at-large position that's appointed by this board, that we reappoint John to serve in that role.
I'll second it.
It'll make it easier to serve as chairman if I'm on the board.
I was thinking that.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Any other business? Thank you for that. We'll stand adjourned until February 1.